Good evening, our listeners. Welcome back to Haz'el Inspirations. We are on our last segment of the legal issues with Mr. Ford. In our episode this evening, we're going to be discussing about civil action complaints and against officials. And we're going to probably spend a lot more time on this issue. I know we have previously discussed the habeas corpus, the void judgment petitions, and grievances. But this one we're going to go into a little bit more in depth. And Mr. Ford, this is my understanding, and you got to remember, listeners, I'm not legal, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a paralegal, so this is all new concept to me. But from what I'm understanding about the civil action complaints, it's usually a complaint or lawsuit. They're lawsuits filed by individuals seeking damages or relief from alleged violations of their rights. But when we are speaking about inmates, they may file against officials for misconduct, abuse, or other rights violations. And the grounds for the complaints, from my understanding, are violations of constitutional rights, such as excessive force, inadequate medical care, or denial of access to legal resources. I want you to kind of touch a little bit on that, but then I really want you to walk us through the process of filing a civil complaint and what it involves with drafting a detailed complaint. And if you can provide some examples and some outcomes about it.
Okay, well, all of these things work together. So the grievance process and the issue that we spoke about earlier with knowing what your status is and knowing who has jurisdiction. So all of these things work together. Depending on what your status is, depending on who you are, determines what kind of rights that you actually have. So, you know, everybody doesn't have the same type of rights. And sometimes that could be why you're dealt with in a certain type of way, because you don't have certain rights. But if you do have rights and you believe that these rights should be protected, then you go through the grievance process and you exhaust your grievance. Basically, you bring it through all the levels. If you end up having to file something in the court, that means something is wrong. That means there's a major failure, because anything that happens inside of the DOC, you should be able to handle it right there. So if you have to take an issue to the court, then that means that there's a total breakdown in the system. You mean to tell me that I can't resolve this by talking to the people that's right here? Like there's a CO right here, there's a counselor right here, there's a housing unit manager, there's a institutional operations manager, you know, there's a warden, assistant warden, a warden. There's all of these people. There's regional ombudsmen and directors and the head of the DOC, the director. So you mean to tell me that I can't resolve this through any of these people? That's why you have to go to the court. So that demonstrates right there there's a total, some kind of collapse. So now you're asking for the court to intervene, and you're asking for them to either issue an injunction, which is basically an order to make them stop doing something, or give you relief because the damage has already occurred. But there's so many different civil actions that you could do. Like, you don't only have to file that type of a lawsuit, like, because if there's some a problem with the officer and he's beating you up or doing something, you could file criminal complaints against them just like anybody else can have a criminal complaint filed against them. So you could file a complaint with the magistrate's office for assault or for slander or defamation or any of these types of things, some kind of abuse, stealing your property. You could file what's called a warrant in detention, which is basically you're going to tell the court, like, look, they took my TV, or they smashed my TV, or they did something to my property. They did not send my box of mail to its location. Then you file that in the court, and you could file that like a small claims. It's almost like a small claims issue. But some of those they have much more minor ways to resolve something legally. One is that criminal complaint, just like anybody else can get a criminal complaint. You can file a criminal complaint, you file that, and it goes to the magistrate's office, and then they're supposed to set what they're supposed to do is set up the appointment for you to talk to the magistrate, and then you're going to explain to him what's going on, and then they can arrest them. You know, they can arrest them right when they get off work or at work or whatever. So there's those issues, and sometimes you have to utilize that because when you're doing too much, like when you're just going from straight from trying to file a grievance to file a civil action in the federal court, well, that's a big gap. Sometimes you might need something more immediate or something much more direct. And we have to utilize that. But that's why, like I said, law libraries are important.
Let me ask you a question, Ford, and you may or may not know the answer to this. I know that we have been focusing on the VA system, but should the paperwork be similar in all states?
Your microphone went out. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Should the paperwork that inmates have to file, should that paperwork look similar? Should it be similarly stated? Like the grievance process, any petitions, said the paperwork should be, or is it state by state regulated?
Well, I couldn't catch all of your question because the microphone was going in and out. However, paperwork is important because it's your proof, it's documentation. So you should get as much paperwork as you can. That's what you're, because you know, sometimes strategically you might want to, in the process of you writing a grievance, you're going to try to file some request
I apologize. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, what I was asking was, is the paperwork that an inmate needs to file, is it consistent from state to state, or is the paperwork worded differently in each institution, in each state? Or is it just a generic form?
You're talking about from state to state. The process is usually generally similar because the process is generally similar because that like say if you're going to the federal court, all federal courts are going to require that you do the same thing, state to state.
Okay, so I'm just saying, if I have, not to cut you off, but if I have a loved one that is in Detroit, Michigan system, and they're listening to our podcast and they have questions, would I be able to give them information that, you know, someone like yourself who in Virginia has experience if he's out in Detroit, or is the standards different? That's what I'm asking.
Well, what the thing is, like, say if you say like I'm from Virginia, I was in New York and I would had an issue in Virginia, then what we do in the law library is we would pull the policy for that state. So whatever state that you're in, we're going to pull the policy for that state, and we're going to go according to whatever that policy is for that state. So, and then if you're going to file a claim against them in that state, you've got to be in line with whatever that state's requirements are anyways. So, but generally speaking, they're all basically the same. They might have, you know, somebody might tell you 12 days, somebody might tell you 15 days, but generally it's the same requirements that you have to bring it up to the people that are at that facility before you could bring it to the court. So you have to go through, the court really wants you to try to resolve your issues within the Department of Corrections first. So in Department of Corrections, we'll try to make you resolve it like first in-house. Then if you have to go outside, you have to file the grievance, and it goes, you know, to the warden, then it goes to the regionals, then it goes to the director. And if all three of those say, hey, you're in the wrong, or we're not going along with that, or take it up with the courts, then that's what it is. Then at the end of the day, you have to take it to the court. But to me, in my opinion, nothing should ever have to reach the court, because there's so many ways to appease a situation that you should really, if I was running a prison, no one would ever have to file anything in the court, because I'm going to be able to deal with it right there.
Okay, so what I want,
if I have my arms crossed,
the
I'm not going to give you anything. I guess you will have to take it to the court.
Okay, so to piggyback on that, what I wanted to ask you was, if someone contacted our podcast and they wanted to speak with you and they were in another state besides Virginia, would you be able to assist them with guidance as to where to go to find information?
Yes, because it's all
Okay,
generally the same.
okay.
It's the
That's
same,
what
like
I needed
it's the
to know
same as if
because I
you
wanted to
were,
make
all right,
sure.
if you're in Virginia, if you're in Virginia and you were talking to somebody in California about the police, the processes are generally the same. Now, what is the exact state code? Oh, I could pull that up on the computer in 2 seconds. So we do that all the time. Um, so like even like when you're talking about the court process, like if you look up cases, they're all run by, or they all are basically governed under federal law. So the Constitution is the same. The federal Constitution is the same in every state. It's a federal Constitution. So like when you have policies and procedures inside of a Department of Corrections, they say, well, this policy and procedure has to comply with the state codes, the state law or constitution, and the federal constitution. So in that sense, all the 50 states are in harmony, and the territories, they're pretty much in harmony when it comes to what they're supposed to do or what's required or what are your rights if you have these rights. Now, the exact process, it's more specific. So they might have a specific policy, but generally it's the same. So if generally what the court is going to say is you got to resolve it in the prison, then within the Department of Corrections of whatever state you are in before you can take that issue to the court. So you're going to have to go through 1, 2, or 3 levels of review. Now, if someone said, I'm coming from Rhode Island, that's nothing for me but to go to the law library and pull up Rhode Island policy and then say, okay, according to Rhode Island, you have to fill out this form or submit it this time and do this. So it doesn't matter if someone was contacting me from another state and they said, I want to have help. Mostly what it would be strategic help, because the policy for that state, it's like, okay, well, it says you got to get this form. I could pull up any state, I could pull it up on the computer right now and pull up what their policy is and print the form out and say, this form right here, you have to fill out and you have to drop it in the mailbox within X amount of days. And then they have to respond to you. And then this form right here, you have to attach to that form and put it in the box for whatever state you are in. So now strategically, what I would do is tell them, now this is what you want to do. You want to make sure, because all court cases pretty much are the same. All the states are operating in a pretty much uniform manner. There might be slight differences here and slight differences there, but nothing to totally throw you off. So you can give general advice, and then you can give specific advice for that state or that prison. You know, it might be that building. If everybody has, you might be in the hole, you might be in a pod, you might be in the dorm. So there's always specificity, whether you're in Virginia in the multiple different ways that you could be incarcerated in Virginia, whether you're in the jail or regional jail or the county jail or whatever it is, or you're in the a female prison or a male prison or supermax or, you know, a lower level or a work center. You know, that varies state to state, or, you know, within the Department of Corrections within the state, and then throughout the various states. But generally, they all have the same type of logic. So if I was to advise somebody, sometimes it might be like, well, look, keep up with all your paperwork. Make sure you're getting affidavits from people who witnessed these events. Make sure you're getting affidavits, because that's just part of the legal process. And those things don't change too much throughout the states. So if that's what you mean. But now when you're
Yes,
getting
that is
to,
exactly what I mean. That's exactly what I mean, because I wanted to make sure, because there were a couple of emails that came through and they wanted to know, they were from different states. I think one was from Arizona and one was from Michigan, and they wanted to know about the legal aspects of our podcast, and they wanted to know, would that apply to them in their state? And that's why the question came up, because they wanted to see if the paperwork was similar. And I told him, I
Yeah,
said,
because
I will ask that question on the next segment. If the paperwork is generic, I understand that the policies and procedures are different. You know, they have different regulations and codes, but pretty much I think that the end result is the same result across the board.
yeah, because it's no different than if you're going to buy a car in Virginia, if you're going to buy a car in New York, it's generally the same. Or if you're going to buy a house in Virginia or buy a house in California, generally it's the same. So, or if you're going to get a job in Virginia or get a job in New Mexico, generally it's the same. You're probably going to have to put in an application. What's the form exactly look like? Okay, which place is it? I could pull that up and then print that out. But generally, this is the way that this corporate system in the United States works. It doesn't matter which state you go to, it's all a corporation. So they all have that same corporate structure. And once you understand those fundamentals, it's too much is not going to change state to state. It's not going to change. Once you understand the corporate structure, you can understand it whether you're in the prison, outside the prison, in a job, in a government job, you work at Best Buy, like what, it doesn't matter where you're at. They all have a grievance system. They have an HR department. They have a way for you to resolve it within that entity before you end up having to take it to court. Because I could work at Best Buy and sue them and they can violate my constitutional rights the same way that I would have to do it if I was in the prison. So some of those forensics, they don't change, whether you're talking about in prison, out of prison, in Virginia, in California, the basic structure sometimes will not change. Which exact form it is, or I could just pull it up on the computer and print it out. Then they say
That's
this is the
good. That's
form that
good
you
to
get.
know. That's really good to know. And thank you for highlighting that. Thank you.
Yeah. So now, like I said, there's various ways that you can resolve the issues legally. So, like I said, you have the criminal complaint, um, which can cause them to be arrested if you have to do that. You have warrant and detain if you're talking about property or you weren't paid for certain things. You have tort claims, which are tort claims are like almost like Judge Judy. Torts are like a harm that was committed to me and I should be compensated for it due to your negligence. So something that you did, you were negligent and you harmed me in some kind of way. So that standard is much lower than the 1983, what we call the 42 USC 1983 constitutional claims, where you're saying that they violated my civil rights. So you have to know that in prison they have, I don't care what state you're in, you can order prison litigation self-help manuals and these types of books that can pretty much, they give very good breakdowns of the multitude of different issues that you might face while you're incarcerated, all the way from medical care to law library to outside rec to um, uh, protection from abuse to protection from anything. So to conditions of confinement, to clothes that you're supposed to have, to heating, to lighting, to sound, uh, to the dogs, to guns, to violence, to segregation. So there's rules that regulate, and you can order these books so that you can read through them and then you can understand. And most of them are written on a federal level because the federal level is pretty much going to be uniform across the United States. You shouldn't have one state that you can be in a hole for. When I came in the system, you could be in the hole for years. You know what I'm saying? But now they make it so because of the fight that has gone on for all these times, you don't go to the hole that long. You're kind of in and out the hole in some places. Now, some places you still are in the hole. The first person I knew when I came in the system, He was in the hole for, at that time, 16 years straight. He died in the hole, Brother Sparks. He was on King Mountain. And when I was in the hole, he was the next dude, brother next door to me. And so that's where I first started learning. No, actually, I first started learning legal stuff when I was in the jail, then from a brother, Big John, that was from New York. So, he was telling me when I was in, this was when I was in the receiving center, he was letting me know of the importance. He got a job in the law library, and I used to go in there because I was trying to fight my case. So I was, building with him all the time to, try to understand. And he was like, look, this is what you're going to have to do. You got to give me the ABCs. So then when I got to King Mountain, the brother that was in the cell next to me, Brother Sparks, he was in there at that time for 16 years because he was Rastafarian. And I had long dreads before I came in, but they cut mine. But he was one of the people who stood up and was like, nah, you're not cutting my dreads. But due to that, he had to, what they would do is they would take you and put you on higher levels. Say you end up on Wildlands Ridge or Red Onion or King Mountain. These are 4, 5, and 6. At the time, Red Onion was a 6. They changed it now to it's a
Right.
segregation unit. But you could end up in the hole for a long time.
Now
So
I
now
have to ask you
the
a
way they have it,
question
you're not supposed to be.
for it. I have to ask you a question. And I want to thank you and I appreciate you sharing personal aspects of your journey. But I do have a question and I want to highlight this before we have to break for tonight for our listeners and for our viewers. Can you just summarize how you are so knowledgeable about this area, about the legal? These are for our listeners and viewers that may not have seen the previous episodes. But if you can just give us a short synopsis of just how you are knowledgeable about this facet of the legal system.
Because I live that environment. So I'm not passing through necessarily. My heart is in there, but I've had to go through the struggles. I've had to go through the fights. I've had to go through all levels of this system. So, and, I was raised with a certain sense of what's right and what's wrong. So, you know, I don't just go for anything. So I'm going to try to figure out the best way that I can and try to get resolution. So when I've gone through, I've had my share of fights or charges and going to the hole and all this kind of stuff. So through those processes and building with the brothers, being in the temple, being in the Nation of Islam, being in uh, the Moorish Science Temple, being in building with the God bodies, building with the Sunnis, building even with the Christian brothers and all the brothers on the yard. It's like, yeah, through my walk is how I learn these things. And if I see an injustice and I know I'm able to comprehend, which I know that everybody can't, because it takes a lot. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot out of you. But you have to have people on the inside that are challenging uh, the procedures or challenging what's going on in a so-called professional or legal way. So, like I said, everything works hand in hand because everything is not resolved like that. Like somebody might go over the tier. You know what I'm saying? Like some teeth might have to get knocked out. But sometimes we have to file the cases in the court too. So, some people are going to die and some people are going to, put the paperwork in and we're going to get the issue resolved like that. But I've gone through working in for several years, working as an advisor due to the fact that I used to go through all of these issues. I became an advisor, and because I fight the system and I fought my case in the courts, I fought my habeas corpus. I One of the brothers that was teaching me the law when I came in when I was on the mountain, and I had several that there's a lot of when you're on the higher levels, a lot of people, uh, a lot of people know more about the law because they're doing bigger time. So with those people, they've taught me several things, and I had to learn. I read cases all night long and understand, and then they said, one of the guys said, look, if you're going to fight your case, you need to not just fight your case, but start fighting other cases. So you got to, expose yourself to the processes. You're not going to know really how to handle yours unless you're handling the case that doesn't have anything to do with you. And then that trial and error is how you're going to understand, start to come into knowledge of the court system, how the courts are even set up, the legal procedures, how do you file something, how do you even stick something in the envelope, how do you write legal mail on it? Like, there's so many things that a person doesn't know, but just from taking cases, being involved, getting your hands dirty is how you'll come through the process of learning. So over the years, and then studying books and studying, having these builds on the yard and in the ciphers, because all of our knowledge, all the Asiatic knowledge inside the system is connected to the law. So we're not just talking about the positive law or the law that man writes. We're talking about to see if that lines up to the natural law and the divine law. So, a lot of our fight comes from the fact that we are, divine and spiritual people. But then we see sometimes that this doesn't line up. So we're going to, those type of people with that type of mindset are going to fight. So through the years of being an advisor, walking the yard, building with the brothers, going through the struggles, going to the whole, getting in the fights, all that type of stuff, going, working as an advisor, working in the law library, filing lawsuits myself, helping people strategize and filing other lawsuits, dealing with prisoner rights organizations on the street, just 20 years of that grind. That's how you end up learning. So it's not just reading a book, it's actually going through the struggles, but also surviving those struggles and not letting it, because many people didn't survive those struggles, or some people got more time due to those struggles, or, but also learn how to control your higher self and your lower self. So, not getting caught up, overly caught up, also knowing that the hand of God, has to be with you. You have to be lined up. You have to see the God within yourself and the God outside of yourself, and try to stay on the path, what we say, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Like, seek those divine principles in everything that you do. So, and that, and also, trying to survive throughout the system, you're trying to keep track of something that you can do when you get out. So everything that I did was not merely just for the purpose of me being inside the prison. It was also saying, well, God willing, if I make it to the release date, then some of these things I'm going to address when I get out. So some of it is a testament to myself. So I kept all my paperwork. I got it out here right now, and I'm waiting to start to utilize it. But to show, look, I went through these things. It's a testament to others and a testament to my own self. So you're not just doing it to resolve the situations in there. You're doing it for, your own story, something that you can tap into and you can draw from when you get out, so that you can change and make the situation better. It's not, and I'm not trying to say that everybody in the system is a victim,
Correct.
but this is all, people are people. You know what I'm saying? And that just because you're in prison doesn't mean anything, because there's a lot of people out here that should be in prison. So, and a lot of people that work there that should be in prison. In my opinion, almost everybody out here should have an experience of going to prison, so you can see how it is. And then you have a chance to examine yourself, because a lot of times people are caught up into, whatever their power is, when power is an illusion. And a lot of people are just not getting caught. And some people are easily getting caught, and some people are the target. But I don't see that many righteous people. You know what I'm saying? But the thing is to understand that, hey, we all have a higher self and a lower self. And if we're going to survive this life or go through it, we all got to help each other out. But yeah, that's how I know, by going through the struggles myself.
All right. Thank you. I think we have come to the conclusion of our segments. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to us and supporting us. We do graciously appreciate it. navigating the legal landscape can be difficult at times, and especially during and after incarceration. And we know that there are challenges there, but understanding the mechanisms available, like the habeas corpus, the void judgment petitions, the grievances, and civil actions, I think that we can empower individuals and their advocates to seek justice effectively. I know that everyone is not knowledgeable about the legal system, and I'm gonna be honest with you. We have to we have to be our own advocate for ourselves, but we also have to want to learn. We also have to want to educate ourselves. Um, no matter, even if it's just the basic, following the regular speed limits or the traffic violations. What happens if I get a DUI? What happens if I get into a car accident? We should be knowledgeable about some of the legal aspects, no matter where you live at, because that's very important for everyone. I want everyone, our listeners, to please let us know if there is any information that you would like to hear from Mr. Ford. You can reach him by our website. And please give us a call. Please share your comments. And we will be getting back with you, as we, always do. Mr. Ford, I would like for us to close these episode with a word of wisdom to our listeners from yourself.
Yeah, whatever state you're in or wherever you're at, like, just try to stay on your square, try to get out. You know, it's all a journey. Life is a journey, but just do the best you can wherever you're at. And if you need help, you need assistance, we're working on things out here to hopefully, everybody got to do their part. So that goes for the people that's trying to help and the people that's inside that need the help. And try to increase your knowledge. That's what our prophet says. He says, my people suffer from a lack of knowledge. It's nothing I can do if a person doesn't want to know. So, and the world is full of foolishness. And if you want to get caught up in the foolishness, go ahead. But if you want to come out of that and try to come to some kind of light, some kind of understanding before you leave this earth, pick up a book, have some conversations, go to the temples, try to come out of that and look for improvement of yourself. Like the prophet says, when you think that you have finished studying yourself, says, what should you do next? He says, go back and study yourself. So this is really all about self. It ain't about calling some other person the bad guy, because, when you point this way, you got three fingers pointed back at you. So you got to examine yourself. And this is all about and the improvement of the self and coming into self-awareness. So, wherever you are, whether you're in the hole right now listening to this, or whether you are on the street about to be in somebody's hole, because there's a lot of people out here seem like they begging to take my spot. I got a bunk still in there with the TV there. Everybody out here want to be doing whatever they want to do, but you might have to end up listening to this. I don't care if you're a celebrity. As you can see, the law can touch anybody, and there's a lot of people walking around out here like they're above the law, or it's not something that they're ever going to have to deal with. But whether you have to deal with it personally or your loved one or something, law governs all events. So only thing I can say is, do everything you can to increase your knowledge. If you don't increase your knowledge, then you will suffer. So, like our prophet says, my people suffer from a lack of knowledge. Increase your knowledge.
Thank you.
Peace.
Thank you. Everyone have an awesome night. Be safe wherever your travels may be. Enjoy your weekend. And tune into us next week as we will be sharing more information. Again, from Haz'el Inspirations, we love all of you. Have a good one.